Okay guys, welcome back to another edition of Rotten Reviews, and on this episode I'm going to take a look at the 2015 movie Tomorrowland with George Clooney and some co-stars. It has a tomato meter score of 50% and an audience score of 49%. This is exactly rotten. And I would agree this movie deserves to be rotten. Its biggest crime is just that it's simply boring. Now, if you were to watch the trailers released before this movie in 2015, you were promised some sort of action adventure, fantasy, perhaps another Disney, an attempt by Disney to start a new franchise like Pirates of the Caribbean, for example. It didn't work out. That's why we're here. Tomorrowland. It leaves you with as many mysteries as does the trailer, a giant mystery box, so to speak. It is supposed to answer the mystery of what is Tomorrowland. That's why the audience went to see it. Yet you never really get an answer to what it is. Most of the movie is a road trip to Tomorrowland, in which Tomorrowland is a very small payoff, a very small part of this movie. And the entire film devolves in the last act into an environmental message that humans are bad, they're bad for the environment, they're just generally bad, and so the bad guy of the film, his mission is to use the technology of Tomorrowland in its alternate dimension to wipe humanity out. And that's it. Most of the movie, you're just wondering what is Tomorrowland, and it kind of teases you along the way with little breadcrumbs, but you're never satisfied. You're just led to a very convoluted, messy, and cliched ending, which packs a lot of action and um, plot nonsense and jargon, very much technical jargon, into the last 20 minutes of the film. Let's move right into the audience reviews. And our first one is from October 23rd, 2019, 4 stars. Interesting concept, fun tie-in of historical scientists, needed more character development, fun, lighthearted, mostly easy to watch film that gets a little bizarre. But it's sci-fi, so bizarre isn't a bad thing. Well, I'm going to give my opinion on the number of stars that it needs. It needs a solid 1.5 stars. It deserves a solid 1.5 stars peak. I wouldn't give it any more. I feel that the the premise was teased to the audience not only in the trailer but through most of the film, 2/3 of it. It didn't give you a payoff for that. I'll give it half a star for the fact that a movie was made and that people got paid, and another half a star, maybe a full star after that, just for the fact that George Clooney actually did a job of trying to bring his character to life. He did a passable job. The other co-stars, don't know their names, don't care. This movie didn't help their careers any. They probably shouldn't have been the focus of this movie right off the bat. It probably should have focused on George Clooney from the start, but it didn't, and the audience was sorely disappointed. Another 5 star, but it's not English. Another 5 star from September 2019. It's the greatest movie I've ever seen. I cannot believe that it gets so low stars. If you are the kind of person who likes science and think bigger, this movie is something for you. No, I totally disagree. It promises that. It promises something, not only an adventure and a payoff to that adventure, but it kind of promises that you'll get some sort of fantasy sci-fi payoff at the end. You get very little. You get just the tease and then a convoluted mess of jargon. Just take the worst type of jargon from a Star Trek episode, but, assume that you never saw any Star Trek material before, and it's more confusing than anything else. 4 stars. This movie was great and is great. You can tell a movie is wonderful if you can watch it multiple times and the movie stands up and remains enjoyable. I don't understand movie reviews anymore when this gets 49%, but Alita, which sucked the first watch and got worse every watch, got like 80%. Take a chance and enjoy this movie. This reviewer is comparing this in 2019 to the movie by James Cameron called Alita Battle Angel. It's not considered rotten. I've never heard anybody suggest that that movie is rotten. so I'm not going to be doing a rotten review, and I certainly wouldn't compare this movie to it. The reviewer is saying that they didn't care for Alita Battle Angel, and so this must be at least as good, and it should deserve that rating. Irrelevant is the word I like to use there. 1 star, terrible waste of time, and the pedo ending was the icing on the crap cake. Yes, this brings up an interesting plot point in the movie. At the beginning, George Clooney's character is actually shown to us in the form of a little boy who discovers a rocket pack and makes his way into Tomorrowland. He has like a little boy type romance with a little girl who turns out later to be an android of some type. Then at the end of the movie, George Clooney meets up with her again. Of course, George Clooney is a late 40s, early 50 something man, and yet he's still got this like sort of boy crush romance thing going on with this 11 or 12-year-old girl. Because she's an android, she hasn't aged, and the girl is still in love with him. And I guess that's what they're referring to. Now, when I watched this, it didn't go over the top enough to give me a pedo vibe, but maybe it did for some people. But it was a little weird and unnecessary. It was just so much of what was jammed into the final act that we were supposed to keep track of, along with all the jargon and the bad guys convoluted, destroying the humans because they're bad plot. 3.5 stars. Graphically, this movie is awesome, but unfortunately the story is as if they broke it in parts and you have to piece it together again. There is still enough in it to keep watching it to the end, but they could have come up with a bit of a better story, and this movie would have been awesome. I still would recommend it though if you find sci-fi and action more important than a good story, like me. No, then I completely disagree with this reviewer. If he says sci-fi and action is more important than a good story, which is what he's saying here, I completely disagree. Otherwise, we wouldn't need to review movies. We could just hire people to create 2-hour-long special effects sequences for us and give us lots of jargon, and we wouldn't ever call anything rotten, right? Completely ridiculous. 0.5 star. As an obvious vehicle delivering liberal messages pertaining to climate change, war, and intolerance, the movie attempts to get the point about the faults of humanity and totally loses anything remotely telling about the story. The film bounces all over the place with no continuous stream of thought and gaping plot holes. Some of the action scenes are too violent for young children, so this movie seems targeted for teens and up. I'll agree with that. It's not something to take the kids to. It's not a family movie, even though the trailer suggested that it was. Little kids would find this completely boring and off-putting. It is marketed, I would say, in my opinion, this was marketed for adults, and yet there's nothing to keep adults interested in this thing. You're promised this fantastic adventure, bringing back childhood memories, I guess, of Disneyland or your imagination of what could be in Disneyland, and you get nothing. It completely goes off the rails at the end. But don't subject the kids to this. It's something that kids would either fall asleep or want to go do something else rather quickly. 3.5 stars. Another well-directed film by Bird himself, but could be told better. That's an allusion to the director, Brad Bird. I don't know anything about him. I just know if this is representative of his work, then I'm probably not going to enjoy his other stuff. 3 stars. Between 2.5 and 3 stars. The problem is the end. Too naive and with little credibility. But while the mystery is on, they manage well with the information. Well, it's just a complete mystery box. The whole story is like you being teased by this mystery of what is Tomorrowland and how does this character, this teenage girl, who looks 25 by the way, she's supposed to be a teenage girl, high school age, she comes across a magical pin or some kind of technology inside a pin that will transport her to Tomorrowland, to this alternate dimension. The mystery is, what's going on, what's Tomorrowland, and how can she get there. You're teased and teased and teased about it, and this teenage girl, who again looks like she's 25, when she gets there, the whole thing goes off the rails, and you're wondering, why didn't I get actually some kind of information and payoff about Tomorrowland? Other than the CGI showing you what Tomorrowland looks like, you get very little of it. 5 stars, great movie. The reason many people give it a bad review is because they clearly don't understand it. The machine used to see the future works similar to the Matrix's Oracle, although different due to the deterministic method applied in each of them, one based on the classic cause and effect on matter's movement, while the other one on theoretical faster-than-light particles. Wow, I think this reviewer, in an attempt to bolster the ratings for this movie, just made the point I was making at the beginning. This thing derails into convoluted sci-fi jargon nonsense, like a really bad episode of Star Trek Voyager and you don't know anything about Star Trek. That's how off-putting it is. It goes into time travel on top of it. It's a complete mess at the end. It's certainly not a payoff. It still doesn't explain Tomorrowland exactly what it is beyond the very superficial look of it. It's completely ridiculous. 3.5 stars. I love Clooney and Robertson's chemistry on this one. I can definitely recommend watching this. Maybe not a masterpiece, but a very good movie indeed. No, it's not a masterpiece. It's not a mystery that satisfies. It's not a thriller. It's not a kid's movie. It's not an action adventure because you get even a dissatisfying amount of that. It's pretty much a big zero at the end. Very disappointing. Half a star. Tomorrowland is embarrassing. It's uneven and poorly written. It's something Disney made up on the back of a cocktail napkin. I'll agree largely. It's something Disney made up and they didn't put too much thought into it. They thought this would spawn some kind of franchise like Pirates of the Caribbean did. This thing had no chance. I don't care how you wanted to play this story. There wasn't enough there to satisfy anybody. 3.5 stars. If this had a better final act, it would be something I loved. Instead, it stumbles to the finish, which takes away a lot. Still, most of this movie worked in terms of visuals and performances, so I recommend it. Well, I'll agree, it worked as far as George Clooney's character. The visuals did work, but it all led you up to nothing. That's the problem. 3.5 stars. Tomorrowland has great visuals and a great soundtrack to make this movie shine. 5 stars. Sorry, I totally disagree with the scoring of this movie. I loved it. I'm sure Brad Bird had a hand in that. Good characters, good performances, and a message of hope. I'll take this any day over the remake crap of the last 5 years. I disagree. Yeah, there's a lot of bad reboots and remakes, but I'll even watch, Terminator Genesis for the second time rather than watch this thing for the second time. 4 stars. This movie is great, and yeah, sure it is. 2.5 stars. I find nothing impressive with this movie except for Rafi Cassidy's acting. The movie opened pretty well, but towards the end, the movie felt cartoonish and less smart, but still an enjoyable ride. Yeah, it felt not only cartoonish and less smart, but completely pointless at the end. 4.5 stars. A great story with lots of twists and turns along the way. Not many twists and turns. You get, every once in a while a new breadcrumb drops on your trail to figure out what Tomorrowland is. But again, it leads you to a place that's completely ridiculous and dissatisfying. 4.5 stars. A thrilling sci-fi film with great acting and effects, only hampered down by a little too long of a runtime, with some slow parts in the middle. A fun imagination, almost if Disney produced a kid-friendly Terminator. No, it wasn't kid-friendly at all. It was kid-boring. And the funny enough, the teenage protagonist, the girl who we follow, that's supposed to be our hero in this adventure, she looks 25, and in fact, in the real world, she was 25. They didn't even pick the wrong girl for this part. They didn't even pick the right girl for this part. Again, I say they should have just stuck with George Clooney's character. I don't know why we had to follow this 25-year-old looking teenager. Plot holes abound. It's completely nonsensical how they show her breaking into a NASA launch facility, for example, with a toy helicopter drone. Completely ridiculous. I mean, it's not too ridiculous for a movie marketed for 8-year-olds, but this movie wasn't made or marketed to 8-year-olds at all. They'd be bored. 5 stars. Tomorrowland touched on life events that resonated with me. As an adult, I have vivid memories of childhood visits to Disneyland. The music has become a part of me. The way this movie is constructed takes those experiences and builds a narrative that builds them into an extraordinary vision of tomorrow. The message is one of hope that we can share across generations. Thanks to the creators, cast, and crew for bringing part of my childhood to life. Wow, it's like you work for Walt Disney Productions at some level, and you were paid to write that. That's what I believe. That's what I'm thinking. Um, 5 stars. Don't listen to the many who harp that this film was too preachy. They've missed the point entirely. Confronting seemingly helpless situations with optimism and hope is a notion we should never be growing tired of. Brad Bird's message is understood by those who undoubtedly recognize the unbridled ambitions of Walt Disney. Wow, another member of the Disney production marketing team in action in 2019, about 4 years too late to save this film, I'm afraid. 4 stars, not English. 2 stars, although visually successful, it has more plot holes than a sponge, and I can't get the idea that Frank is a pedophile out of my head. Go green. Yeah, referring to the 50-year-old guy having the romance with the 8 or 10-year-old robot girl. Pretty weird. 5 stars. The true spirit of Disney at work in this film, inspiring dreams of a better tomorrow. This movie is inspiring and hopeful. What this world could use a little more of. Actually, it's not inspiring and hopeful. It's just the same old. Humans are bad for the environment. We're destroying the environment with our corporatism, our warfare, etc. And somebody in an alternate dimension has figured out how to wipe us out and put it all back right again, using time travel too. Really bad, convoluted mess. Let's do another 5 stars. I think this movie is highly underrated, and I'm not sure why. I avoided watching it because of the terrible ratings, but decided to give it a try today, and it actually is really good. Watch it with your kids and enjoy. This is from December of 2018. I disagree. If this guy took his kids to see it and thought they would enjoy it, they're probably still angry about it a year later. No, I disagree. Kids wouldn't find this interesting in the slightest. 2 stars. Wow, how bad can you get? This will be a candidate for the Mystery Science Theater of the future. Gets off to a nice start, but quickly bogs down, eventually turning tendaciously preachy and unbelievably boring. Clooney and Laurie turned in completely unbelievable characters, but that could have been the script. Robertson was mostly better, but again the script sometimes left her high and dry. Raffi Cassidy was a high point in the film, but in part because of her looks. So he's saying superficially it was okay, just the visuals, but the rest was crap. Yeah, I'll pretty much agree on that. 2.5 stars. The lack of character development and cohesive storytelling made Tomorrowland more like Forgetful Land. Great effects, okay acting too, but Bird is all over the place, sermonizing as though he lost the editing script. This is a film that you want to work as a viewer, but it is so choppy, convoluted, and lacking continuity that it becomes a jigsaw puzzle with pieces that don't fit on the board. Yeah, I'll largely agree. He's trying to preach the message that modern human society is just bad for the earth. It's bad for everybody. That's great. We've seen this a million times before. And, it almost tries to make the villain sympathetic in that, he's only the villain because, he's trying to protect the universe from the bad humans. Fails on every level. 3 stars. Tomorrowland's "We need to save Earth or we're all going to die" message is a noble one, but it seems awfully forced. It seems awfully tired. It also is pretty much something that doesn't belong. It's not the payoff we were looking for in a fun action adventure in which we were promised this Tomorrowland. We got very little of Tomorrowland. We just got this preachy message and stuffed with convoluted jargon. That's just over the top, worse than the worst Star Trek episode. 3 stars. A wonderful first 2 acts that crashes and burns in the third. There is great acting, a compelling mystery, and some wonderful ideas here. It is visually captivating for sure, but the third act with its villain makes this film a massive disappointment. I'll agree, but not 3 stars. I say 1.5 stars. 1.5 stars. Oh wow, this happens to be the first terrible movie with George Clooney in it. The second was Batman and Robin. The protagonist is dumb, the environment is dumb and generic, and this is the main reason I do not want the future at all. Yeah, if this is the future, it's pretty depressing and uninspiring and disappointing. But it's certainly not the worst George Clooney movie. And yeah, I may rub people the wrong way, but some of the movies people think are so great with George Clooney, like Oh Brother, Where Art Thou, for example, complete nonsense and also boring. 2 stars. Seriously, I am only giving 2 stars to this movie because the visuals are amazing, but that's all. I don't get what this movie was about. I got the message, but I did not need more than 2 hours with sci-fi that is not really sci-fi to tell me that very simple message. What is the target audience for this movie again? They never explain anything. You just have to accept everything that happens because reasons. The beginning was interesting, but then I started to feel very frustrated. Yeah, they're just continually dropping breadcrumbs to lead you to the promise of a big reveal about the mystery, the conspiracy, the what is exactly this Tomorrowland. When you find out, you just want your money back, assuming you paid for this in the theater. I didn't. I saw this for free when it was released on home video. Somebody else had rented it. I'm glad I didn't pay for it because I was very disappointed about halfway through and I realized this wasn't going to go anywhere. It was too late for it to go anywhere. 2.5 stars. This is a major letdown from Brad Bird, whose visual style is great, but is painfully boring. 3 stars. It is heard as a documentary, not for an extensive film, from jetpack trips to rocket launches at the Eiffel Tower. Tomorrowland is a visual gift. It's a fun and fast-paced story that goes back to the Spielberg classics of the 80s. No, don't drag Spielberg into this. It's nothing like any of the Spielberg films. Not in any way. And yes, this reviewer is touching upon one of the weirdest and most expensive CGI scenes in this film that the director obviously thought was supposed to wow us away. It was so epic, incredible, which is the part of the movie in which the Eiffel Tower in Paris splits into two halves so that a gigantic rocket ship can launch out of it and fly through some kind of wormhole to Tomorrowland. It is, needless to say, it's not as epic as that sounds. It's completely illogical and pointless. It doesn't even seem to fit with anything else that's going on. It's just to show you what a crazy idea could be made with, 2015 CGI. Pointless, and it brings more plot holes to how ridiculous it is, how the crowd in Paris and even police officers on the Eiffel Tower don't seem to be concerned that a rocket just shot out of it. Completely ridiculous. 5 stars. Love this movie. Wish there was a part 2. This movie is way underrated, probably due to the fact that it wasn't advertised enough. I disagree. This movie was well promoted, but it was promoted in a way that promised you this mystery of Tomorrowland and you would get the answers, and it didn't deliver that. Nope. Let's continue. Everyone I know who's watched this movie loved it and is baffled to the fact that there isn't a part 2. I love how this movie is so inspiring to be a great functioning member of the community. What? Everybody I know, the only person I would run into, I could hypothetically say, that might ask me why there wasn't a part 2 to this, was probably wondering if part 2 would actually deliver what part 1 didn't. But no, this movie and director had their shot. Obviously, there was no part 2 because Walt Disney realized he blew his shot at making an interesting film. It was just too boring. No one's going to give it a second chance. Don't expect a part 2. Use your imagination, I guess. Be an Imagineer in the Disney way and make up your own part 2 in your head that, makes more sense than this movie. 2 stars. The viewers seek more. Tomorrowland is a plot-driven sci-fi thriller about a girl that finds a collector's pin that allows her to enter into another world. The action and chase sequences are slick fun with mature choreography created and performed lethally. It is a visual galore brimmed with gritty humans, fragile robots, darker future, and jaw-dropping technology, which frankly was difficult to pull off considering the vision, but it surely is convincing enough. They say it's 2 stars, but they seem almost apologetic in supporting it. I'm sorry, but it was disappointing. I don't care how many words they're going to spew out in their review. They're never going to convince me that there was something redeemable here or that it was worth watching a second time. It's not. 5 stars. I don't know why some people don't like this movie. Seriously, I just watched it and loved it. Sure you did, sure. 3 stars. Movie review, Tomorrowland. This movie was so interesting. When I saw it, I felt so connected to the story, and I wanted to know more about it. The director of the movie is Brad Bird. The type of movie is science fiction. There are a lot of important characters, but the main ones, okay, that's a great synopsis, but why do you think it's 3 stars? Right off the bat, I'm just going to say I don't care. 5 stars, great writing, great acting, visually stunning and fun, a family-friendly sci-fi mystery that my teenage daughter and I both enjoyed. Yeah, it's like a family-friendly sci-fi mystery that's never resolved, and it's also like family friendly but not family interesting. If you take the kids to this, they're going to fall asleep and wonder why you didn't take them to Disneyland instead. 3.5 stars. This movie is more about the imaginative potential a journey towards a better tomorrow could offer, compared to the current way we're headed, than the actual destination that is a futuristic utopia. I agree that this movie is trying to tell you that there's something better out there than this movie. It convinced me of that, that maybe even Tomorrowland in Disneyland would be more exciting to me than this movie. But this message I've heard a million times over, and everybody gets it by now. Humans are destroying the environment. We're making too much war. We're up to no good. By nature, we're just no good. So somebody, some big bad villain has to come by and just get rid of us all. Usually that's done in the form of aliens that come by to decide to wipe us out. Either way you do it, it's boring, unimaginative, derivative of too many other previous works that did it better, and it's not what the trailers promised or the marketing promised for this film. We wanted an action adventure. We wanted the mystery to be solved of Tomorrowland. We didn't get it, so that's why I say 1.5 stars. Here we have 3.5 stars. Worth making, so deserves over a 50% rating. Generally entertaining, if not a bit confusing. Really, it was a bit confusing, so you're saying you didn't figure out what was going on, but you're giving it 3.5 stars. You're very kind. 4 stars. I give this movie a 4 because Disney did a great job with the plot and story. Sure, it is confusing and hard to understand, but this fix will grow on you. Again, you're giving this 4 stars, but you're saying it's confusing and hard to understand. So why are you giving it 4 stars? Let's try to find out. Continuing, some parts I would change is how mean Frank Walker is to Casey and Athena, or how Governor Nix can just kick people out of a dimension because they have. But the story is fun and a blast. But I must warn you, to all adults, watch this with your kids because there is profanity. I'm not sure if there's really profanity. I mean, if there is, it's very mild. But it's not like offensive to the kids because of that. The kids are going to find it offensive because it's just offensively boring. Boring. Don't take the kids. 5 stars. Disney's best, most fun, original, and awe-inspiring live-action movie in years, or possibly ever. A beautiful sentiment to the power of awesome or optimism, and a true testimony of one of the greatest dreamers of all time, Walt Disney. Wow, you're on the Disney marketing train. I like it, but you know, you should put all those words to use fixing a movie like, maybe, I don't know, maybe you can fix the Rise of Skywalker with all those words. We'll see. 3.5 stars. Didn't even realize this was Disney until I started watching, but they made it very obvious as you watch the film. No, you think so? Tomorrowland, the Walt Disney Castle at the beginning, all that stuff. Multiple long seconds of I don't know, production company logos at the beginning didn't clue you in. I'm going to just skip the rest. 3 stars. Not what I was expecting. I thought I'd be getting a mystery set in Disney World's Tomorrowland. Yeah, that's what I thought too. But decent anyway. Whenever you see me watching a Clooney movie, it is more for my wife than me anyway. She's a huge fan. This movie explores deeper themes than the usual Disney fare. Should Utopia be for everyone or only the most gifted? It keeps your interest, has some cool destructive gadgets, and a sleek futuristic vehicles and settings. It's worth a watch. Well, they're trying to tell you that, yeah, part of the plot of the movie is that the villains or the people in the Tomorrowland dimension, they want to take the young bright kids from our world and spirit them away to Tomorrowland, where they can put their talents to work creating a utopia, and the rest of us just need to die off. It's ridiculous. It's been done too many times before, and this is not what a Walt Disney movie is supposed to be giving to people. People take their kids to Walt Disney movies because they want the action adventure, the mystery set in Disney's Tomorrowland. You gave it 3 stars, but right off the bat, you just like told me what's wrong with this movie in the first sentence, and you don't seem to get it. 1 star. Tomorrowland disappoints even more when seeing great actors play less credible characters. I'm not sure who the great actors are here. George Clooney, okay, maybe, but he does a good job. It's just that he has nothing much to do. That's great. And all his co-stars are not considered great actors. In fact, I'm not sure who they are. 4 stars. What I kept thinking as I watched it was, wow, this is really fun. The leads are fantastic. What were all the negative reviews about? Maybe you should actually read the ones that came before you. 4 stars. I liked this movie. Great acting, a pretty good story, and awesome visual effects create a good movie. Just one thing makes it a lack a bit, and that is the fact that the final battle, that was pretty cool, just didn't impress me as I would have liked it to. I give this movie an 85%. So you had no problems with the mismarketing of the action adventure or the unsolved mystery or the convoluted crap at the end. You just didn't. You just wanted the final battle at the end to be like a scene from Star Wars, and then everything would have been fantastic. Wow, that's pretty great. 5 stars. I believe the message this movie wants to give is powerful, even if critics were mixed. I think this movie is just awesome. Yeah, it's so powerful to once again state that humans are bad. We're bad for the environment. Our wars are just hurting the earth, and we're just too primitive to know what to do with ourselves. Yeah, that's so powerful. Like I haven't seen this for the past 50 years. Please. 3.5 stars. A fun adventure film. The story gets a bit muddled at times, but on a higher level, it's easy to digest and follow, even for the youngest viewers. No, they'll fall asleep within 25-30 minutes of this. They'll be asleep on the couch. Trust me. The acting is great all around, and it really stands out. The plot isn't necessarily unique, but it knows where it sets out to do and does it pretty well. I disagree. This turns into like a road trip movie along the way between a teenager who's actually 25 and a robot girl, and they pick up George Clooney along the way, and they drop, interesting tidbits that make the mystery more interesting, and then it all leads straight into the dumpster at the end. Tomorrowland, 49% audience score, should have like a 32% to 30% audience score. Too many people are giving this 5 stars just because they think the CGI and the visuals were great. That's not what was promised. That's not why people went to see this. They went to see an actual story. They wanted to be satisfied in the end. Didn't give them any of that. So I'll just conclude here. I think I've made my point. This is thoroughly rotten, and I will see you again on the next episode of Rotten Reviews.